Hey everyone, you're listening to the Vint podcast, your source for market insights, wine industry news, and updates on our current collections. Enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Vint podcast. You may have noticed the new intro. As I referenced last week, we're moving to a new format. It's going to go away from more of just a monologue from me and Nick over to a conversation. We're happy to add our head of investor relations, Brady, to the podcast. Welcome, Brady.
Thanks, Billy. I'm excited for the new chapter.
Yeah, likewise. This is going to be nice. I will say in the back ends of the Vint team here, Brady is the primary teammate who I nerd out about with wine. So we thought who else would be better to add to the podcast than Brady. So I'm really looking forward to our conversations. Basically, everyone, as you're listening, we'll just start having conversations about different topics. We're going to start out with updates, as we usually do, about our collections, and then we'll move into different topics in the wine world that Brady and I both have found interesting, and we'll share them back and forth, and hopefully you guys will find them interesting as well. So first off, let's touch on the NFT launch. You guys may have noticed we sent out an email. We have worked with a partner producer based in Sonoma called Emmett Scorsone to launch a series of NFTs around their Judge Palmer line. This Judge Palmer line is their high-end Cabernet line that sources fruit from specific areas, couple single vineyards in Napa, and now a Sonoma Reserve. The wines that are included in this NFT are all actually single vineyard. So we're really excited to have this partnership. This is kind of going along our lines further with working closely with producers and helping them kind of share their wines with a broader audience. So these wines are amazing, and we work with Palmer Emmett from Emmett Scorsone to really kind of move and leverage this new technology to highlight their wines. If you guys are interested in learning more about the wines, we have one from the Tokelon Vineyard, farmed by the Beckstoffer family. We have one that's from the George's III Vineyard, also farmed by the Beckstoffer family, and then one from the Ellis Alden Vineyard. This one is in Sonoma. The first two are in Napa, and they're really exciting Cabernets, all from different years. And we are going to have Palmer Emmett on next week for you guys to be able to kind of get a firsthand winemaker's point of view on the wines themselves. Moving on to collection status, Brady, do you want to take this for a little bit, just to let everybody know where we're standing with the collections?
Yeah, as some of you might know, we still have 2 collections open on our website right now. On our platform, we have the Rhone Valley collection, which is priced at $40 a share. We have the Piemonte collection, priced at $50 a share. The Rhone collection, we're actually under 250 shares now, Billy. We have 219 shares remaining of that collection, and then under 1,000 just today of the Piemonte collection. We have 948 of that one still remaining. So plenty of shares available if you weren't able to get into these collections yet. And then we are looking ahead to our next collections being released in the first part of March. So plenty of time to get in on these 2 awesome collections.
Yeah, I would say these 2 collections both offer a really unique opportunity as 2 regions that have been producing, like I mentioned before, top quality wines for decades and centuries, but are also just now really coming to their own in terms of collectability and demand on the secondary market. So definitely grab your shares while you're in.
Yeah, and especially this Rhone collection, I think we've seen a sharp uptick in investor interest over the last couple of weeks. It's been nice to have a collection open on our platform for so long. It just gives folks an opportunity to see exactly how our platform works, I think. And so it's been nice to see the increased interest in the Rhone collection. I'm not sure if that has to do with the thesis and information that we provide, but there's definitely been a really strong demand for Rhone in the recent years.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I think there was a little lull around the holidays, and that's always, tricky. People aren't necessarily in their investing mood, but as everybody's ramped back up in 2022, we've seen both strong demand for the Rhone and now the newer Piemonte collection. So exciting stuff.
Can you tell us, Billy, a little? Hold on, let me pause. Can you tell us, Billy, a little about the upcoming collections and just where we're at in our filing status with the SEC?
Yeah, so the next collections are all officially with the SEC for review. Their response time typically varies. It shouldn't be too long. Like Brady said, we're aiming for an early March release of our next collections. But we have an exciting mix. I think what you guys are going to find in this next collection are moving a little bit away from purely just regional themes. We have a vertical planned. We have kind of a mix of kind of the best vintages from a certain decade planned. And then again, we have a couple other small thematic ones, whether it be a region or a style of wine, or of course more whiskeys. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff coming up. Definitely some blue chips, definitely some emerging wines. So yeah, it's going to be a great opportunity to further diversify everyone's portfolio.
And you mentioned we have a vertical coming up. Can you just give a little bit of insight to listeners who might not be familiar with that term and just what it means for building a collection? Is a quote unquote vertical more desirable for collectors?
Good point. Yes. So a vertical is basically a series of wines from the same winery from consecutive vintages. They're not always consecutive, but basically saying if you have a winery that has been producing wines for the past 30 years, a vertical could be all of the wines from the 70s, from 71, 72, 73, all the way up to 80. And what that allows you to do is and the reason they're valued is basically it allows people to taste wines and see where they are in different development stages. So it really gives you a sense of how a wine kind of transforms, what the different vintages, how they impacted the flavors and the aging potential of each wine, and really kind of give you a sense of how that winery developed their style or their wines develop over time. And to the point of value, typically, at least historically, we've seen that when you're able to offer this series, say 10 different vintages in a row, those are more collectible than just a mishmash of different vintages or all from one vintage. Collectors like to be able to purchase these verticals and be able to taste across the decades or the years and really experience this development of the wine themselves.
Yeah, and when we look ahead to a time where we might try and offload one of these collections and provide a proceed for our investors, we can't necessarily speak to exactly what liquidity will be like at that point, but you have to imagine that the opportunity for a collector to come in and want to purchase the entire collection of one of those verticals would be higher than, maybe if you had a collection of a bunch of different labels in different vintages, where people might be more keen to purchase them piecemeal, maybe one case at a time. It seems more likely that a collector might want to just purchase the whole collection down the line.
Exactly. Yeah. Either that or, if we have multiple cases from each year, maybe they would buy half of the total collection. So it's easier to liquidate down the line when you have a collection, and it's certainly added value. Being able to take these, create this vertical from multiple different sources, where we're creating more value than if we were just to sell each of these cases on their own.
Yeah, so. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I wanted to offer a couple of different statistics actually about our collections that have launched so far. I believe, are we on collection 16 now, Billy? Is that right with the Piemonte?
I think so. They're coming so fast and heavy that I've almost lost count, but I believe it's 16.
Yeah, and across those collections, I went back and did some, just kind of pulled some numbers, and I was an early investor on the Vint platform and purchased some of the first shares that were open to the public back in May 2021. And I purchased shares of every collection since then, like several of our investors do. Kind of purchasing a few shares of each one as it comes out is a great way to supply diversity and a diversification into your wine portfolio. So if you would have invested in every collection since Vint launched, you would own fractionally over 2,300 bottles of wine. Of those, it's actually 2,344 bottles. And of those bottles, there are 107 unique bottlings. So whether that's a unique label from a unique producer or a unique vintage of that label, is 107 unique bottles. And then 38 bottles of whiskey and 1 whiskey cask. So that's pretty cool, being able to offer our investors fractional ownership in what is, somewhere around 2,500 bottles of wine and whiskey. That's really cool.
Yeah. And also what's cool is thinking about if you had a personal cellar of almost, nearly 2,500 bottles, your cost for insurance and storage and everything would really be going up at that point if you had a personal cellar. So it's, again, we're really starting to get to the point where we're offering not only value in the wines that we're choosing, but in that storage and maintenance as well. So
yeah, exactly.
Point that out.
Actually, I saw someone in the fractional community on Twitter recently had posted about their short-term rental properties that they own fractionally, and it was really cool because he was saying that he owns shares in 20 different properties across 5 states, which I just thought was such a cool innovation of the alternative asset and fractional asset community that someone could in a sense own portions of property, have access to the proceeds of rental properties across so many states and regions. That's just something that was never a factor in the marketplace before. So I think Vint is really fitting in with that, allowing people to have access to so many different assets that they sometimes just physically wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Same thing with some farmland ones. It's going to allow alternative investors to really build quite the unique portfolio that was basically unthinkable, even just 5 years ago, probably 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, that's awesome. Something
cool.
else.
Well, do you want to?
I was going to say something else that was unthinkable 5 years ago was paying $90 for boxed wine. I came across this, and the kind of whole wine industry was talking about it over the last 2 weeks, and that's Tablas Creek out in Paso in Central Coast, California, is releasing 100, I believe it's 100 boxes, 3-liter boxes of their rosé. And they're pricing the boxes at $95 a box. And they're really shaking up the industry, focusing on sustainability, lowering their carbon footprint. And just wanted to get your thoughts on boxed wine and what it means to, at retail, see a boxed wine for consumers at that price range. It's not typically what people think about when they think of boxed wine, I don't think.
It's really interesting because for me, while it kind of appears to be like, people kind of bunch it with like Franzia, in terms of an actual vessel and enclosure technology, it's really good for wine, actually. Like when you start sucking the water out of the bottom, the air is very much displaced inside and there's no oxygen really contacting the wine. So in terms of something for bulk that will allow wine to keep for an extended period of time, I think the technology is great. I do think you're going to see more and more higher end wine in boxes. But that said, I do think the stigma is so strong that, it's not going to be commonplace anytime soon. What are your thoughts from your consumption point of view? If you say you didn't know it was Tablas and it was just a $90 box and somebody said it was a good producer for some reason, would you be interested?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and the farther I go in my wine journey, I feel like the more open I am to, when I was a grocery store consumer, I would have said, oh, boxed wine, and kind of turned up my nose. But, I think the more you learn about the industry, similar to like screw cap bottles, I think that I'm definitely more open to trying something like that. And I mean, yeah, knowing that it's Tablas and that they make incredibly consistent wines of high quality, that helps a lot. But if I'm having a party and the option is between being able to, dispense 4 bottles of wine from a box or purchase 4 bottles and have to open them throughout the evening, I think that's actually really cool and is a great talking point if I'm, putting together a gathering. The pricing actually is it's advantageous because 4 bottles, I'm reading here from the Tablas blog, 4 bottles of this rosé costs $112 retail, but the box is only $95. And so you're actually saving $17 by purchasing the 3 liters bulk in the box. And they're able to save on shipping charges. It takes up less space in terms of storage. So there seem to be a lot of benefits. And I think that we could probably see at least Tablas, and I'm sure others, starting to move to high-end whites and reds in box as well.
My only concern with like a boxed white or rosé is how do you keep it like cold once it's out of the fridge? Like say you were in this setting where you don't want people opening, running to the kitchen and like they have it on the table. I would just want to be able to keep it cold, and you can't just, it's in the box, so you can't, be cooling the cardboard.
So I'm reading these, and you might know more about selling kind of the individual kegs. I was reading in the comments of this section, and users were talking about Tablis could even cut their or increase their kind of sustainability metrics and also cut costs by just selling the bladders, just the bags. So basically, you would buy like a vessel one time. Maybe it's a keg, maybe it's like a stainless steel kind of vessel, and then you can just replace the bags in the inside, and that would allow you to, set it down in ice, and then like dispense out of it, and you would just replace with the bag on the inside, which I think is a really cool idea. I'm not sure how that works in terms of shipping. Boxes are obviously make it super easy to ship, but that seems like actually a really good solution if there was kind of an industry standard, maybe 750, 1.5 and 3 liter bladders and dispensers that held them.
No, that makes sense. That's really interesting. One of the producer I used to just work for a couple of years ago, they used to do a lot of keg rosé, which is also, it seems weird, but if you think about it in terms of oxygen getting to the wine, it works really well because, it's an oxygen-free environment inside of a keg. So,
and are those refillable? Like, would you be able to just say like ship it back to the winery, get it refilled, or take it there? Or how did those work? Was it done after? Okay.
Yeah, it's just like beer. You're just putting it in and putting it under pressure.
Sure.
So it's obviously not an environment where anything could like ever develop or it's meant to age in there. But it just keeps that fruity freshness that you're looking for in a rosé or a white, like forward white.
Yeah, and that's why Tablis, I think, is, and they mentioned why they're starting with their rosé because, you're wanting to drink this within the first 2 years of the bottling. So I think it makes a lot of sense to start here. And, you would imagine almost all of their whites they could end up putting in box at least.
Yeah, no, I would think so. They have some own varietals that I think can develop some like nutty character over time. And they've like I think it's called like a Spirit Blanc or something. I actually had a couple of half bottles of that from my visit around. But yeah, no, certainly. I think you're spot on there.
Anyways, good on Tablis for kind of being innovators in the sustainability space and really trying to, I think it said it lowers their carbon footprint by like the bag and box. Yeah, bag and box package is 84% less. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, though, it really comes down to weight. Like to make the glass itself isn't always that bad, but then you have to ship the glass to the winery, and then you have to ship those full bottles, and that weight and those planes, boats, potentially trains and trucks that are all carrying this, like that's a lot of emissions. So that's a really, really good point.
Yeah, and even the lightest bottles I read in this article are like 1 pound. So, anyways, good on Tablis. So,
yeah, cool. Well, then on the news front here, I have a few things I've been looking at, but something I guess I found really interesting is there's a new Treasury report out from the U.S. that's looking into kind of the costs of alcohol in the current system for U.S. folks. For many people who may not know, you experience this all the time, but there's a 3-tier system in the United States. It came about after Prohibition, basically trying to make sure that people who made alcohol couldn't necessarily be the ones who controlled all the channels to sale and also control the retailers. Apparently there was like some saloon culture back in the day where a lot of these monopolies were going on. So after Prohibition, they made it so that there had to be 3 steps: producers, distributors, and then retailers. And now studies have been showing that this is actually deterring smaller producers from kind of entering the market, whether it be small wineries or microbreweries or craft brewers. And it's actually costing the American people hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So that's something I found really interesting, that the Treasury report, after all of these years, has looked at it, and the Biden administration is considering some sort of alteration to this long-standing system.
Yeah, I was just like, they kind of stick it right up there in the first line of this article we're looking at in Drinks Business, but that beer drinkers are paying an estimated almost $500 million a year more than they should. It's 478 million, just based on the way that the markets are structured and like the way that distribution works, like you said. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, thinking about how cheap some alcohols are out there, and the fact that there's even still a system whereby there are multiple people kind of with their hands in the money pot along the way that don't necessarily need to exist.
Yeah. And then what it's led to as well is, it's very hard. And I work for multiple producers that like to get distribution and somebody to be actively trying to sell your wine at these retailers, you got to give them a lot of money. So that's where a lot of these costs come in. It's like, unless you're doing huge volumes and they have these incentives to sell your wine or your beer, they're not really going to do it. So that's what's led to a lot of, especially in the beer side, these like Molson Coors or Anheuser-Busch companies basically owning all the shelf space is because they have enough money to get that distribution. Whereas if they were to remove the necessity to have distributors or that layer, and producers could sell closer to the retail side again, you would be seeing a bunch more of these small producers or small beers kind of coming in at a much lower price point. So not only would it be cheaper, but you'd also have more options to choose from. So I think that would be, I'm just really excited for it. I think it could work really well. And just, from a Vint side, we've explored also selling wines down the line, and, it would make everybody's lives a lot easier. So I thought that was really exciting.
Yeah, and I might be naive to this, and I'm not as much a part of beer culture, certainly not as much as wine. But I feel like if I go into a local market here in our city, and if I want to pick up a local IPA, 4-packs can sometimes be like $18. Whereby I can go into a local wine shop and get a really great bottle of wine for $14. I just bought a bottle of Moscato d'Asti today, and I paid $15 for it, and it was awesome. So yeah, I'm maybe in the future you see local craft IPAs that you're able to purchase for under $10-12.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Also, for those who don't know, Asti is kind of like one of the central villages up in the Piemonte. Like Barolo is just outside, and so is Barbaresco. So one reason the 3-tier system was top of mind is in my most recent WSET diploma exam. It took up a good few pages in the book, and that's basically like the WSET is the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, and it's a global basically education platform to help wine and spirit professionals, predominantly wine professionals. And it's just interesting to think of people all around the world, taking up 3 or 4 pages of quality space like that. That was a lot in the book actually for the law space, just to learn about the 3-tier system. So it's a big deal, and it's an oddity in the world. So I hope it changes. But on the WSET note, you took your first wine exam this week. How did that go? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I took the WSET level 2 exam. So for those of you who don't know, the first 3 levels of WSET, it goes WSET 1, 2, and 3, and you can opt to skip level 1 and go right to 2, which is what I did because I had a little bit of a basis of wine knowledge. And level 2 mainly focuses on winemaking, like the basics of the winemaking process for both white, red, sparkling, fortified wines, as well as basic geography, intros to the major grape varieties, and some geographical and climate components that affect the wines that are produced around the world. And so, yeah, I took the first exam for level 2 last night. It was a 50-question multiple choice. Felt like it went pretty well. There's so much to dive into in the wine world that, like you said, the real estate that the 3-tier process was taking up in your book. I definitely understand that because it seems like there's so much that you need to pack into even a basic quote unquote overview of the wine world, that each individual topic sometimes only gets a few sentences. So studying for that exam was definitely a journey, and learned a lot, and hope to take WSET 3 if I'm able to pass. So
yeah, that'll be exciting. And just so everybody kind of knows, there's a bunch of different sommelier certifications out there, sommelier or wine beverage industry kind of exams or certifications. But the 2 primary ones are the Court of Master Sommeliers, which ends with Master Somm, and then the WSET side, which it works in conjunction with the Master of Wine program to end in Master of Wine. So there's a number of steps there, but it's exciting that Brady started his journey. I started my WSET a year and a half, 2 years ago, switching over from the Court of Master Sommelier side So I had done up to the certified sommelier exam in the CMS side, which is basically the equivalent of WSET 3, but they wouldn't let you skip right to diploma. So I had to do the WSET 3 and now in diploma, which takes altogether too long compared to the sommelier side. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, basically I'm on level 2 of that exam, or finishing level 2 of that examination structure, and you're had just finished level 5. Is that right? Your first exam of the diploma?
So the diploma has 6 different parts. I've done the first 2 of them. The 6 parts are basically two theory, viticulture and vinification, and then the next part is wine business, which is why this 3-tier system was in it. And then the remainder are a research paper, and then 3 wine heavy exams. One is just called Wines of the World. It's literally every still wine that is not fortified. So there's 5 months of studying, and at the end it's blind tasting 12 wines and a number of theory questions. And then the other 2 pieces are a fortified specific exam and a sparkling wine specific exam, which are both shorter, but fairly intensive, I guess. I'm looking forward to those actually a lot. But so I think one note I wanted to touch on, the WSET, you learn, I guess at WSET 2 level, you would be definitely getting the grapes of Bordeaux. So this is the last thing I kind of want to touch on for us here. And then we'll wrap up for this week is the grapes of Bordeaux. They started considering hybrids this week, which I found, or in recent times, I found really interesting, because hybrids are basically illegal in most of France. And for those who don't know, hybrid grapes, as opposed to crossings, are basically grapes that are Vitis vinifera, or originally from Europe, and with Native American varietals, say Vitis labrusca or Vitis riparia, something like that. And what's interesting there is the reason that you would cross these 2 is maybe one, it really comes down to climate change. It means that some have different resistance to either temperatures or mildews or stuff like that. So I found that really interesting, because they went for years and years of having the core 5 grapes: Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. And then they went and added, I think it was, I'm looking at here, 8 new grapes recently, and now they're even considering hybrids. So it's crazy how much that they're worried about global warming and how much they're preparing already for this change.
Yeah, how much do you think that will, in terms of top producers in the area in Bordeaux, how much do you think it will affect their production? Like what wines they're focusing on, in terms of actual space and real estate in the vineyard that these new varieties could potentially take up? Like, is this, could we see maybe 5% of these vineyards planted in hybrids in the future, or, is it maybe moving in a different direction?
I think it's going to start from the bottom up for the most part. And I think it will start with these new varietals that are allowed before any major chateau moves to hybrids. I think that'll kind of be more of a last resort. But one thing to keep in mind is the best vineyards right now are the best because they perform perfectly in the best years, but then they also perform well in the worst years. So it's these vineyards are known for their resilience and basically able to stand out. So they'll be some of the last ones to change. I think it'll definitely start with some of the more bulk producers. And I do think you'll start, seeing some of these move into percentages. But I think I'm just reading, or I had read in this article, that basically these new varietals, I think there's 5 new red varietals and 2 new white varietals, can only make up, here, I'll double check here, collectively make up 5% of a producer's vineyard area and 10% of the final blend. So they're taking baby steps and they're moving in. It's interesting to see a couple of the varietals. One is Touriga Nacional, which is a Portuguese grape known for, port really, but it's producing great still wines in Portugal, but in really hot areas. And then another varietal they're going to be allowed in is Alvarinho, also known as Albarino. both can perform in slightly warmer and humid climates. So that's interesting that those two are among the selected approvals.
Yeah, I think, as you said, the top most investable producers, to kind of tie it back to our platform. One, they're not going anywhere for the time being. And even when it comes down the line, there will be a time where the vineyard sites won't be ideal anymore, it seems, just based on our climate trends. But, if we look 75 or 100 years in the future, it would be really interesting to think about how those producers are planning for that time, because, the producers are so generational. They have to be thinking ahead, 2, 3, 4 generations ahead to, how they can prepare now. So be really interesting over the next few years to hear from some of those top producers if this is top of mind.
Yeah. We'll touch on this in another section, but I recently just bought a book that's called Inside Bordeaux, that it basically is trying to provide an insight more on the terroir of Bordeaux and looking forward and what that means for the future of farming there and how they'll have to adapt to climate change. So I'll hopefully get back to you with some more insight on that. But I definitely think this farming and harvest times those practices will change before any mainstream overhaul, and I think they'll be able to adjust. I mean, over the years, Bordeaux was drastically different before phylloxera, which was that louse that killed a lot of the varietals, or a lot of grapes or vines in general in France, and they came back with still a high quality, but it looked completely different. So I think it'll just evolve over the years, rather than all at once or go away. So it'll be really interesting to keep in touch or to keep track of. This has been nice. I enjoy this format very much. I hope our listeners do as well.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon, Billy.
For questions, comments, or feedback on the Vint podcast, please email us at support@vint.co. To check out our current offerings and to sign up for the Vint platform, find us at www.vint.co. That's www.vint.co. Vint and VV Markets are offering securities pursuant to Regulation A. Our offering circular as amended can be found on the SEC website. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments such as those on the Vint platform are speculative and involve substantial risks to consider before investing. We may provide communication that may contain certain forward-looking statements that are subject to various risks and uncertainties. Information provided in any communications is not legal, business, or tax advice. All prospective investors should consult a legal, tax, or business advisor concerning the subject matter of any communications and any offering.